Welcome to African Folktales by Tammy. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. Also share this story to someone who might be interested. Let's get into the story. In the early days of Nicole and Marcus Kalu's marriage, the streets of Rivendell often buzzed with admiration for them. They were the picture of harmony, young, ambitious, and seemingly wrapped in a kind of love that made others hopeful. Nicole had met Marcus during a community outreach organized by the local church. He had been charming, articulate, and passionate about youth development. She, with her calm demeanor and deep sense of purpose, had drawn him in like a magnet. At first, they were two people with individual callings, yet their paths aligned as though heaven had written their story ahead of time. Nicole came from a family rooted in prayer and hard work, raised by a widowed mother who taught her to seek God's direction in all things. Marcus, on the other hand, had grown up scrabbling for stability, his father absent, his mother overwhelmed. To Nicole, he seemed like a man determined to break free from the hardship he had known. And so, when he looked at her with those eyes full of fire and ambition, she saw not only a husband but a partner to build with. In those days, Nicole was still sketching the idea of a skincare brand in the pages of her quiet moments. Inspired by her grandmother's herbal remedies and the scriptures that spoke of oils, ointments, and healing balms, she wanted to create something both restorative and spiritual. She would whisper prayers over her early batches of oils, even when they were just experiments in her small kitchen. Marcus encouraged her, or so it seemed. He would smile and nod as she shared her ideas, offering comments like "that's brilliant," "love," or "people will line up for this." Nicole believed him. She trusted him. They lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the fringes of Rivendell's bustling core. The neighborhood was loud with life, children shouting as they played, neighbors arguing and laughing in equal measure, music leaking through thin walls. Nicole loved it, the chaos and color of the city. It felt like being wrapped in stories. Every time she went to the local market, she would strike up conversations with elderly women selling herbs and oils. She would ask questions: what plant healed which skin condition, how long to let the roots soak, how best to combine aloe with turmeric. She kept journals filled with notes, recipes, and prayers. At night, after Marcus returned from his job as a junior financial consultant, she would bring him tea and read out her discoveries, her dreams, and even her fears. He listened or pretended to. He would nod while checking his phone, sometimes tell her he was tired, but that she should keep going. "You're the visionary here," he said once, and her heart swelled. She never thought to question his sincerity. Marcus, to her, was a man burdened by work and expectation, not deception. She prayed over him every night, laying her hand on his back while he slept. She would whisper, "Father, bless the work of his hands," not knowing that those same hands would one day move to betray her. It was during one of those prayerful nights that Nicole first sensed a stirring in her spirit. Something wasn't sitting right. Her dreams began to take on strange tones, blurry shadows, missed trains, forgotten doors. She couldn't explain it. At first she thought it was simply anxiety. The weight of building a business with no capital, the pressure of living in a city where image was everything. It made sense to feel unsettled. But when her devotional reading landed on Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 for the third day in a row, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding," she began to pay attention. Nicole never moved without prayer, and she always waited for confirmation. It was one of the reasons her progress felt slow at times, but she believed deeply in divine timing. So even though her plans were ripe and the formula for her first line of products almost complete, she paused. She took 3 days to fast. Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy with what he called emergency meetings, arriving home later than usual. She didn't question it. Instead, she prayed his strength, unaware that his strength was now being used to build a separate future that didn't include her. Nicole had once written in her journal, "God, if this vision is truly from you, let no hand sabotage it." She didn't know then how prophetic her words would become. At the Church Women's Fellowship, she often testified about how supportive Marcus was. "He's not just my husband, he's my earthly covering," she said once, and the women clapped and smiled. None of them knew. Not even her closest friend, Miriam, who had helped her test samples, knew what was quietly brewing behind Marcus's careful mask. On weekends, he would drive her to the countryside to collect herbs, even helping her carry baskets, asking curious questions like, "What does this one do again?" Nicole would laugh, explain it all over again, thinking how lucky she was to have a husband who supported her so much. She didn't know that he was memorizing her process, absorbing her knowledge like a sponge, not to stand beside her but to run ahead of her. At that time, Marcus had already created a separate folder on his laptop labeled branding. Nicole never saw it. She had given him her passwords, her trust, and her dreams, believing they were building something together. He had already bought the domain name for the website, secretly registering it under his name. And when he looked at Nicole across the dinner table, talking about love and shared futures, he never flinched. Nicole had never considered herself overly suspicious, but she had always paid attention to patterns. Her spirit was trained to listen, not just to words, but to the spaces between them where truth often lived in silence. In the weeks that followed her fast, something in her home shifted, quiet but tangible. Marcus became increasingly evasive. His eyes, once eager and filled with shared dreams, had grown distant. He smiled less during her product testing nights and often excused himself to take calls in the bathroom or on the balcony, claiming they were client emergencies. Nicole did not immediately jump to conclusions. She simply watched. Observation became her silent weapon. One evening, while she was preparing dried chamomile in the kitchen, Marcus walked past her, talking on the phone in hushed tones. He didn't know she had paused what she was doing and listened. His voice was gentle, but what he said made her stomach knot. Yes, I told her it's still in the works. She has no idea, relax. We'll launch before she even finishes. Nicole didn't move. She stood there with her hands resting on the edge of the counter, unmoving, her ears catching every syllable. That night she didn't sleep. She didn't cry either. Instead, she sat on the floor of her prayer room, her Bible open on her lap. She kept repeating Psalm 27 verse 1 to herself. "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" As if the words could build a hedge around her sanity. She didn't accuse Marcus. She didn't change her behavior. But from that day forward, she started writing things down in places he couldn't find. Rivendell had always been a city of talkers. If you whispered something in one end of the city by morning, it would be a chant at the marketplace. Nicole had grown up in its rhythms and understood the culture of casual surveillance. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to sit on balconies pretending to read newspapers while collecting information like bees gathered pollen. On one particularly noisy Tuesday, Nicole visited a skincare supplier located in a part of town she didn't usually frequent. She was scouting for a specific route she needed for a test batch. The vendor, a chatty woman named Imelda, casually mentioned that a man and his beautiful business partner had come weeks ago asking for the same herbs. They said they're launching something big soon, Glow of Eden or something like that. "Have you heard of it?" Imelda had asked with a friendly nudge. Nicole had managed a soft smile, her lips barely parting. She thanked Imelda, paid for her purchases, and walked to her car without saying another word. Her heart thudded against her chest. Glow of Eden was the name she had scribbled into her journal months ago after praying for divine inspiration. She had never spoken it aloud to anyone but Marcus. That night she couldn't bring herself to eat. She sat in the backyard instead, her hands clasped tightly and her eyes fixed on the stars. "Father," she whispered, "reveal what is hidden." She didn't want vengeance. She didn't even ask for justice. She only asked for clarity. She had learned from her mother that prayer wasn't always about asking God to change a thing, but about asking Him to show you what it truly was. Over the next few days, Nicole began to trace back every conversation, every shared file, every discussion she had ever had with Marcus about her business. She realized she had handed over her vision without a single protective measure. The trust had been absolute. She felt foolish, but she refused to let shame bury her. Instead, she lit a candle in her prayer room, opened her Bible to Job 12:22. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. and began to pray not just for answers but for the strength to face them. She decided to keep her discovery hidden while she quietly gathered what she needed. Nicole began waking earlier than usual, long before Rivendell stirred. In those silent hours, when the sky still held onto the last darkness of night, she would kneel beside her window with a shawl over her shoulders, praying and journaling. She needed direction, and the only place she could find it was at the feet of God. She recalled the prophet Elisha, surrounded by enemies, yet seeing what no one else could. She asked the Lord to give her vision, not just of what Marcus was doing, but of what she was to do next. In those early mornings, ideas flowed again. She began sketching a new vision for her skincare brand, different from the one that had been compromised. But more than strategy, she prayed for the spirit to endure betrayal without bitterness. When Marcus came home late again, claiming he had a late meeting, she simply nodded and offered him food. He seemed surprised by her calmness. He didn't know she was no longer asking questions because she already knew the answers. Nicole had started documenting everything, printing receipts, saving voice recordings, making copies of business name registrations. Each day she walked around the house with a calmness that was not born of ignorance but revelation. Her heart no longer trembled. She had put the situation in God's hands, and now her role was simply to listen and obey. Her peace disturbed Marcus. He began asking if something was wrong. She smiled and replied, "Nothing you haven't told me." She left it at that. The Holy Spirit had begun preparing her, not just for confrontation, but for liberation. Nicole became more silent in her days and more vocal in her prayers. She returned to her fellowship group, but didn't speak of her pain. Instead, she testified about the faithfulness of God in revealing what man hides. The other women noticed her shift. She had become more serious, more introspective. When she laid hands during prayer, there was new authority in her voice. What they didn't know was that every touch came from a place of brokenness that had been brought before God and exchanged for discernment. At home, she began to notice even more clues. Printouts left in the printer, Marcus whispering in the hallway, unfamiliar perfume on a shirt collar. But Nicole did not throw a fit. She had come to understand that timing was everything. If she exposed things too early, she would only be left with anger and no proof. She wanted the truth to speak for itself. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1 echoed in her heart daily. To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. One night, while Marcus was asleep, Nicole walked into the kitchen, turned on the light, and looked at the rows of oils and jars she had crafted. She whispered, "You were born of prayer, and you will not die in betrayal." That moment became a turning point. She decided she would not only protect her vision, but reclaim it fully. Her energy shifted from sorrow to strategy. She called a lawyer the next morning. She began filing documents Marcus knew nothing about. She started creating a new identity for her brand, one wrapped in truth and powered by resilience. While Marcus was still planning to leave her in ruins, she had already begun building her own door out of the wreckage. And in her heart, she held tight to 2 Samuel 22:31. As for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. Nicole had learned early in life that not every battle required a sword. Some only demanded silence and a steady eye. After the pieces began to fall into place, she didn't react the way most would expect. She didn't scream, throw accusations, or demand explanations. Instead, she began her days even earlier, pouring more intention into her time with God. Her prayer room became her place of clarity, not just comfort. She often sat in the same spot where light from the window would fall directly onto her Bible, a soft golden glow stretching across the pages as if heaven were underlining specific words for her heart to see. It was during one of those mornings she read Psalm 37:7. "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes." That verse did something to her. It lifted the weight of urgency off her chest and reminded her that God was not unaware. With that, she stopped letting Marcus's actions steer her emotions. She went through her days with calculated calm, doing only what was necessary, speaking only when she had to. Her focus shifted toward gathering quiet evidence. Every conversation, every new slip, every careless word from Marcus became another puzzle piece in her silent investigation. She took note of the branding materials she once created appearing in unfamiliar places. Her old sketchbooks were gone. Files she'd saved under shared folders now mysteriously empty. The shift wasn't sudden, it had happened slowly, like ink seeping through cloth. And now that she saw it, there was no turning away. Rivendell was never quiet. That city thrived on movement, voices, and the restless energy of people always seeking something: fame, money, gossip, love. Nicole had spent most of her life in it, but for the first time she felt the city watching her differently. Not openly, but subtly. At church, some women began to act overly sweet, asking her curious questions like, "You and Marcus still working together on that skincare idea?" Or, "Did you hear about that new brand coming up, Glow of Eden, I think?" Each time Nicole responded with grace, though her insides twisted. She realized Marcus and Linda hadn't only stolen her business model, they were parading it in spaces she was connected to, using the very paths she had cleared. It was the betrayal that stung most deeply. Not just that they had taken what she had built, but that they had done it with the confidence of people who believed she wouldn't fight back. That assumption, more than anything, revealed how little Marcus had ever truly known her. Nicole was not loud, but she had never been weak. She believed in timing and process, not because she feared confrontation, but because she feared stepping ahead of God's instruction. After one Sunday service, she sat alone in the back of the church long after the crowd had gone. Her hands were folded on her lap, her head bowed, not crying, just still. In that silence, she heard the words of Isaiah 54 verse 17 echo in her mind. "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." It was not just a promise. It was a warning to those who had formed the weapons. She got up that day with a quiet resolve. It was no longer just about her business. It was now about her voice, her dignity, and the truth. The evenings in their home became a performance of small talk and hollow routines. Marcus still played the part of the busy, supportive husband, returning home with just enough energy to ask her how her day went, then quickly retreating to his side of the bed with his phone. Nicole responded with simplicity, offering just enough words to make things seem normal. But behind that calm exterior, she was building a case, document by document, date by date. She had enlisted the help of an attorney, an older woman named Mrs. Ainde, who was known in Rivendell for her tenacity and her sense of justice. Nicole hadn't told a soul beyond her lawyer. Not Miriam, not her pastor, not even her mother. She wanted no premature discussions, no advice that would cloud what she knew she had to do. She compiled emails, old voice notes, contracts she had once drafted and shared with Marcus in excitement, never imagining they would be used against her. She printed bank statements and collected screenshots of transactions tied to accounts she didn't recognize. The web of deceit was vast, but it wasn't tangled enough to hide the truth. Each evening after Marcus went to bed, she would sit in her workspace and quietly review what she'd gathered, praying over it as if she were preparing an offering. "Let nothing escape your eyes, Lord," she would whisper. "Judge between me and them." She wasn't looking for revenge. She didn't even desire their downfall. She only wanted to reclaim what was hers and do it with integrity. Because at the heart of everything she had ever created was the belief that God did not need dishonor to elevate his children. And if she would rise, it would be by his hand alone. The night before the business gala, Nicole stood at the mirror for a long time, staring at her reflection. She looked older than she had 6 months ago, not worn, but weathered, like wood that had faced many rains and still stood firm. Her eyes were clearer now. Her hands, though steady, carried a different kind of strength, shaped by long-knife prayer and quiet resolve. The house was quiet. Marcus had already left, claiming he had a late-night meeting with potential investors. Nicole didn't ask for details. She simply nodded and turned back to her notes. In his absence, she finalized the files she needed to take with her the next day: legal proofs, name registrations, email exchanges that bore timestamps like fingerprints. She carefully packed everything into a single brown envelope, laid it on her dresser, then knelt beside her bed. Her prayer that night wasn't long or loud. It was simple: "If I speak, let it be truth. If I move, let it be in step with you. And if I fall, let it be into your hands. As she climbed into bed, peace settled over her, not because she knew what the next day would bring, but because she knew that whatever it did, she was not walking into it alone. There is a kind of silence that comes after pain, a deep, strong quiet that isn't empty but full of resolve. That was the silence Nicole slept in that night. And as dawn prepared to break over Rivendell, Nicole's time in the shadows neared its end. What had been done in secret would soon be brought into the light, and in that light the truth would finally be seen. The city of Rivendell rarely slept on nights of grandeur. It had a strange way of wrapping itself in anticipation, especially when an event carried the promise of drama or glory. The annual business gala was the kind of occasion that drew both the ambitious and the curious. Entrepreneurs dressed in fine silk and tailored suits walked with pride, hoping to be seen, hoping to be heard. Nicole arrived alone. She chose a deep emerald dress that rested softly against her skin, simple in design but striking in color. There were no exaggerated accessories, no attempts to draw unnecessary attention. Her presence carried its own weight. She moved through the glittering crowd with a calmness that unsettled some who noticed her. Linda was among the first to see her, standing across the room near the stage, laughing with a small group of investors. Nicole's appearance caused a pause in her laughter, a quick tightening of her expression, but she recovered swiftly, pretending not to be surprised. Marcus stood beside her, dressed immaculately as always. He noticed Nicole seconds later. Their eyes met. He smiled with the polished ease of someone who believed the matter was still under control. But beneath that smile, there was a flicker of discomfort. Nicole didn't smile back. She gave a small nod and turned to speak to someone else. She had no intention of announcing anything prematurely. She would wait for her moment. Ecclesiastes 8 verse 6 stirred in her mind. For there is a proper time and procedure for every matter, though a person may be weighed down by misery. The weight of months of betrayal rested behind her quiet eyes, but she walked like someone who had nothing to prove and nothing left to fear. The room was filled with conversation, clinking glasses, laughter that sometimes bordered on the theatrical. People mingled, exchanged cards, pitched ideas, and positioned themselves for opportunity. The air buzzed with ambition and silent comparison. Nicole stood at the edge of it all, watching. Her fingers lightly held her clutch, inside of which sat the envelope she had prepared the night before. She didn't let her eyes linger on Marcus and Linda, though she caught glimpses now and then, their confident movements, the way they addressed the crowd, as if they had earned everything they were about to unveil. Nicole had seen the flyer days ago. Glow of Eden was listed as a featured brand, a revolutionary skincare line with promises of authenticity and tradition. It was her vision they were about to present, twisted and wrapped in deception. Yet she felt no desire to run toward the stage or make a scene. Instead, she waited, trusting that when the time came, she would know it. When Marcos finally took the microphone, the room quieted. He began with practiced charm, thanking the sponsors, welcoming the guests, and easing the crowd into the moment they had all gathered for. Linda stood slightly behind him, smiling, poised, a woman comfortable with attention. Marcus spoke about passion, about vision, about the dream to create something lasting. Nicole listened unmoved. She had heard him use the same words to encourage her. Now he used them to erase her. Her grip on the clutch tightened slightly, not from anxiety but from focus. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else, "God, I trust you." The words were not performative. They were an anchor spoken from the deep waters of endurance. As Marcus gestured toward the screen where the brand's logo appeared, applause broke out. But Nicole remained still. The applause faded just as she stepped forward. The timing was not rehearsed, but it was perfect. Nicole's heels clicked softly on the floor as she approached the stage. She did not rush. Her steps were slow and deliberate, each one gathering the attention of the room. Conversations stopped, faces turned. The tension moved like a ripple. Marcus noticed first, his voice caught mid-sentence. Linda's smile vanished completely. Nicole reached the foot of the stage and, still silent, opened her clutch and removed the envelope. She held it in one hand and took the microphone with the other. "Good evening," she began, her voice calm and clear. "Forgive the interruption, but I believe the truth deserves a voice tonight." A murmur swept through the crowd. Marcus tried to step forward, but Nicole turned slightly toward him. "You've said a lot," she said. "Now let me speak." She opened the envelope and slowly withdrew the documents, product formulations, dated journals, registered concepts with her name clearly listed, email correspondences with Marcus that outlined her vision long before Glow of Eden ever existed. She laid them out on the podium, allowing those nearby to see them clearly. "This brand was born in my kitchen through my research, my prayers, and my hands," she said. "What stands here today is not innovation, it is theft." She did not raise her voice, she didn't need to. The authority in her tone was enough to silence every sound in the room. She turned toward the audience and continued, "I didn't come here tonight to destroy anyone, but I cannot sit in silence while my work is paraded as someone else's achievement." It was no longer a confrontation. It had become a testimony, the kind built in silence, not for revenge but for restoration. And as she spoke, her voice did not tremble once. The room stood suspended in stillness after she finished. Nicole stepped down from the stage without waiting for applause. She had not come to win a crowd. She had come to reclaim her name. Behind her, the silence slowly broke into awkward whispers. Some people reached for their phones. Others looked toward Marcus, whose face now carried the unmistakable weight of being exposed. He didn't speak. There were no words he could offer to rearrange what had just happened. Linda had already moved away from the spotlight, her expression rigid, her body tense. Nicole walked past them both without a glance. The night air outside was cooler than she expected. It brushed gently against her skin, as though welcoming her into a freedom she had long been denied. She exhaled deeply, the kind of breath one releases when the burden has been fully lifted. Inside, the gala continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The charm had peeled away. Truth had spoken, and even Rivendell could not ignore it. Nicole walked to the car waiting at the curb and slid into the back seat. She didn't cry. There were no tears left, just a quiet sense of completion. Psalm 126 verse 5 crossed her mind. Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. She had sown in silence, in heartbreak, in prayer. And tonight, without force or fury, she had reaped. As the driver pulled away from the building, Nicole leaned her head back and closed her eyes. She felt the presence of God settle beside her, not as a distant witness, but as the one who had walked each step with her. There was still more ahead, but for now justice had spoken, and it had spoken with grace. The aftermath of that night came in quiet, unfolding waves. Marcus woke the next morning to silence, an eerie kind that stretched across the room like fog. There was no warmth from Nicole's side of the bed, no soft rustle of morning devotion, no scent of oils diffusing from the corner table. The house, once humming with her presence, had become unfamiliar. He sat up slowly, every inch of his body heavy with the weight of public disgrace. The night replayed in fragments. Nicole stepping onto the stage, her voice carrying the weight of truth, the eyes in the room shifting toward him, not with respect but with contempt. He had tried to smile his way through it, but the moment her documents hit the podium, everything crumbled. Linda had not spoken to him since the incident. She had left the gala early, muttering something about damage control, and hadn't answered his calls since. Investors were pulling out by morning. Some sent polite emails stating a change in direction, while others didn't bother with words. The betrayal he thought he had executed in silence had echoed far louder than he imagined. As he sat on the edge of the bed staring at nothing, the words of Proverbs 16 verse 18 drifted through his mind uninvited and unsettling. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. He had thought himself clever, strategic even. But now all he had was the echo of his missteps. The house still had her scent, her touch in the little things. But Nicole was gone, and this time not just for the night. Nicole didn't move into a grand apartment after she left. She had never been interested in outward appearances. She chose a modest flat near the edge of Rivendell, close to the hills where the morning wind was crisp and carried no memories. The space was small but peaceful. It had wide windows and soft light perfect for starting over. She furnished it slowly, adding items that felt like her, earth-toned cushions, shelves for her books, and a small prayer corner near the window. The first few mornings were still, not with sorrow, but with reflection. Nicole would wake up before dawn, kneel by her window, and whisper prayers that carried both gratitude and grief. There was a quiet pain in letting go, even when it was the right thing to do. But she knew better than to hold on to what God had already removed. She often prayed with Psalm 34 verse 18 open beside her. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Each day, she found pieces of herself she hadn't realized had gone missing. There was no longer a need to watch her words, no longer a feeling of walking on glass. In the silence, she rediscovered her joy. She returned to the kitchen, not as a place of tension, but of healing. She mixed new oils, revised old formulas, and for the first time in months, she worked without fear. The brand idea she had once buried under disappointment was reborn in those quiet mornings, but this time with a new name and deeper meaning. She called it Ashes and Oil. The name came to her during a night of prayer when Isaiah 61 verse 3 seemed to press itself into her spirit, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. Every product in her new line would carry a purpose beyond skincare. It would speak to restoration, to healing, to the power of what God could do with what had been broken. Nicole began working in partnership with women from the community, many of them single mothers, survivors of loss, and dreamers whose visions had once been ridiculed. Together they created small batches, packaging each bottle with care, prayer, and a note of encouragement inside. The brand grew slowly through word of mouth and local testimonies. There were no big launches, no aggressive marketing. But people came, drawn not just by the quality, but by the story. Nicole never used Marcus' name. She never spoke of the betrayal publicly again. She let the work speak. Her silence was no longer submission, it was strength. Rivendell took notice. Magazines wrote about the brand's heart. Customers sent letters. Women showed up in tears, sharing how the products had touched more than just their skin. Nicole always listened, offering hugs, not headlines. The world had seen her exposed, but now they were seeing her rise, not as a victim, but as someone who chose peace over bitterness. Marcus, meanwhile, found himself increasingly isolated. The brand he had tried to build with Linda had collapsed within weeks. Suppliers backed out, citing Nicole's public claims. Customers withdrew support. Investors, wary of scandal, refused further dealings. Linda had quietly disappeared, no goodbye, no explanation. The apartment they once visited to plan their business sat empty, dust collecting on the counters. Marcus returned to the same house each night, hoping Nicole might come back, even if only to argue. But there was nothing. Her absence was complete. He tried reaching her through mutual contacts, but she remained unreachable. Even her social presence had changed. Nicole no longer posted images of oils or quotes about trust. Instead, when she did appear, it was only to uplift, to speak about healing, to share scriptures that reminded people of God's nearness. Marcus watched silently, scrolling through her posts in the dark, reading every caption, every verse, until his phone screen blurred. Regret was not loud, it was quiet and persistent, a hum that never left his chest. He often sat in his car outside her new building, watching the windows, waiting for a light or a glimpse of her. But he never approached. He knew he couldn't. He had broken something that apologies could not repair. The life he had tried to steal had become something sacred without him. And all he could do now was sit in the wreckage of what he had built on lies. There was something sacred about the way mornings began in Nicole's new space. The city of Rivendell, with all its noise and movement, somehow paused just enough at dawn to give her a few moments of undisturbed quiet. She had built a rhythm for herself, not out of obligation but necessity. The mornings became her altar, her place of reflection. She would light a small candle, open her window, and sit beside the same small table she had used since the first night she moved in. With her Bible spread open, she read slowly and without rush, letting the words settle before moving on. One morning she lingered long over Psalm 30:11. You turned my mourning into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy. That verse became her anchor for weeks. Not because the journey was without pain, but because she could finally feel the weight lifting. She no longer checked over her shoulder or measured her words in fear of who might twist them. She spoke freely now, lived freely. The face she saw in the mirror no longer looked haunted by betrayal. Her smile returned, not forced but natural. She had found a joy that was not loud but steady. It came not from validation or applause, but from knowing that she had survived what tried to silence her. She was still healing, yes, but she was whole. And that wholeness was something no one could fabricate or fake. It had been earned in silence, through prayer, through heartbreak, and through surrender. The work she did through ashes and oil began to grow in ways that surprised even her. It was never about making a name. Nicole had left behind the desire to impress or outperform. Instead, her vision now centered on helping women rediscover beauty from within, especially those who had lost themselves in the shadows of someone else's story. She trained her small team with intention, teaching them not only how to prepare the ingredients, but how to bless the work with prayer and consistency. Many of them came from hard places. Some had survived toxic marriages, others had lost businesses or children or their sense of self. Nicole didn't just employ them, she created space for them. The workspace was more than a place to earn, it was a sanctuary. Laughter returned to their routines, the kind that was born from genuine release. They shared testimonies during breaks, not because it was required, but because healing had become part of the culture. Nicole insisted on keeping things personal, no mass production, no loss of quality for quantity. Orders came in steadily, not in floods, but enough to sustain the team, enough to keep the vision intact. She didn't push for recognition, but word of mouth spread fast in Rivendell. Customers returned not only because the products worked, but because the story behind them was real. They saw their own reflections in Nicole's journey. She was no longer just a businesswoman. She had become a symbol of restoration. Her scars didn't repel people, they drew them in. Each label carried a line of scripture, and every package included a handwritten note from someone on the team. It was not marketing, it was ministry. Occasionally, Nicole received letters she didn't expect, apologies from people who had doubted her, quiet acknowledgments from former investors who had believed Marcus's version of events. Some came out of guilt, others out of newfound admiration. Nicole didn't reply to most. She had no interest in reopening conversations that had already reached their conclusion. But one letter, folded neatly without return address, arrived in familiar handwriting. She didn't need to read the name to know it was Marcus. She sat with the envelope in her lap for a long time before opening it. Inside, the words were heavy, not dramatic, but raw. He admitted everything, how he had envied her, how he let ambition override conscience, how he justified betrayal in the name of success. He wrote about regret, about loneliness, and how he now walked the streets of Rivendell with the weight of what he had done pressing down on every step. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, only that she might know he finally understood what he destroyed. Nicole read the letter once and folded it back slowly. She didn't cry, there was no anger, no joy. Just a quiet finality. Forgiveness she had already offered in her own way, in her prayers, in the release of bitterness. But reconciliation wasn't hers to give. Some doors, once shut, are meant to remain closed, not out of spite, but because growth requires distance. She placed the letter in a drawer, not to dwell on it, but to remember that even ashes speak. Not every apology needs to be answered. Some are just meant to confirm what you already healed from. In the months that followed, Nicole's story remained just that, a story. She didn't turn it into a book or a campaign. She didn't retell the events at every opportunity. She let it exist quietly, shared only in small moments when it could help someone else reclaim their own strength. Her focus stayed on the present, on building something meaningful, on showing that failure or betrayal did not have the final say. She mentored young women who were starting businesses, guiding them not only in product development, but in spiritual grounding. She taught them the importance of wisdom, the necessity of boundaries, the beauty of stillness. Nicole reminded them that success wasn't always loud, and healing didn't always announce itself. It could come slowly, in soft mornings, in honest prayers, in choosing not to respond to every provocation. She kept her circle small but her heart open. And in all things she acknowledged God. Proverbs 3 verse 6 guided her daily. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. She didn't need to be seen by everyone. She had already been seen by the one who mattered most. And that was enough. Rivendell remained the same noisy, watchful city it had always been, but Nicole no longer lived under its gaze. She moved with purpose, not performance. Her story had been twisted, stolen, and rewritten by others, but in the end it had been returned to her. Fully, truthfully, and with power. My dear listeners, if this story has found you at the crossroads of betrayal, heartbreak, or uncertainty, hear this. You are not lost. You are being repositioned. Never underestimate the strength in silence, the power in prayer, or the protection in patience. Not every injustice must be answered with noise. Sometimes the greatest response is rising in the presence of those who expected your ruin and choosing peace over retaliation. Don't be afraid to begin again. Don't be ashamed to walk away from what no longer honors your worth. When you give your vision to God, He doesn't just preserve it, He multiplies it. And even if the world sees you fall, God will ensure you rise in a way that humbles those who try to bury you. Protect your purpose. Discern the spirit behind the smile. Not everyone who claps for you wants to see you win. And not every delay is denial. Sometimes it's God hiding you from premature exposure, preparing you for elevation that will not come from man, but from heaven. When they betray you, when they mock your prayers, when they leave you out, remember this. The throne is still occupied, and the same God who sees what is done in secret will reward you openly. Your scars will not be your shame, they will be your seal of survival. You do not need to explain your healing. You owe no one a replay of your pain. What God restores, He restores fully, and when He vindicates, He does so completely. So walk with your head high, even if your heart is still mending. The story isn't over, and if God is writing it, trust me, it ends in glory. Heavenly Father, You are the God who sees in secret and rewards in the open. You are the one who brings justice without vengeance, restoration without noise, and elevation without manipulation. I come to You today, standing in the spirit of Nicole's journey, lifting every heart that has been broken by betrayal, every dream that has been stolen, every voice that has been silenced. Lord, give them the strength to remain steady, even when the storm howls. Give them the wisdom to wait, not in despair but in divine expectation. Let Your word be a lamp to their feet and a light to their path. Shield their vision, guard their hearts, and hold their hands when no one else understands the weight they carry. Father, for those who have been used, forgotten, or falsely accused, remind them that You are not just a defender, You are their Redeemer. Restore what was lost, multiply what was taken. Replace what was stolen with something far greater. Let their enemies see the table You prepare for them, not out of spite, but as a testimony of Your faithfulness. I declare today that every delay will birth destiny. Every betrayal will lead to a better beginning. And every person listening will know what it means when You say, I will restore the years the locusts have eaten. Let healing come not only to the wound but to the soul. Let peace reign where anxiety once ruled. Let the oil of joy replace mourning, and let beauty rise from every ash. In Jesus' name, amen. We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you.